Talk Radio.
Today's Earth Energy Forecast Show on this Tuesday, March 19th, 2019. Thank you for joining us today, or if you're listening later in the podcast, thanks for tuning in. Before we begin today, I just want to say that my heart goes out to those affected by the New Zealand mosque shootings, the historic flooding out in the Midwest, and the two Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashes that occurred recently. My heart also goes out to the people of Deer Park, Texas, the firefighters, plant personnel, and Mother Earth, as a huge chemical fire continues to burn and spew toxic chemicals such as naphtha, xylene, and toluene into the air. May the fire be extinguished soon, and may we not suffer long-term effects from it. I know there's so much more going on around the world. I just wanted to mention these today. It's so timely that the show is airing right before the spring equinox. Around the time of the vernal equinox, there tends to be cracks or openings in the Earth's magnetic field. March tends to be the most geomagnetically active month of the year. A stream of solar wind from an Earth-facing coronal hole is predicted to hit Earth tomorrow on the equinox. The Earth's geomagnetic field has been shown to affect human emotional and psychological states. In today's show, we're going to talk about how we can mitigate the effects by using subtle energy technology. Eric Thompson is the founder of Subtle Energy Sciences, LLC, and began his healing journey into the world of consciousness technologies after struggling with bipolar disorder for nearly 4 decades. For the last 12 years, he has been researching and developing proprietary methods for producing and capturing subtle energies in digital form. He has also developed methods for amplifying subtle energetic waveforms and embedding them into digital media. This proprietary process results in digital media that, when opened and played on most electronic devices, broadcast silent energy pulses that assist anyone in various areas of health, healing, consciousness expansion, and human performance. As a matter of fact, I have one of Eric's mandalas, the Heart Coherence mandala. I have it opened up on my computer. It is therefore streaming out its energy right now to you, or if you're listening to this later in the podcast. So we're putting everybody into Heart Coherence. That's wonderful. And welcome, Eric, to the show. I'm so excited to do this show today with you.
Thank you, Joan. I'm excited as well to be here. I just started reading your book.
Hardwired to Heaven?
Through it. Yes.
Uh-huh.
It's a great little book. I'm about a third of the way through it. So seems like we got a lot in common. I'm sitting there reading through the book and finding so many common themes that I touch on, but also new information. So great job.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say that the Heart Coherence mandala that is opened up twice now on my computer, so that's streaming a little bit more energy. Did you get your inspiration for that from HeartMath, because they use the term Heart Coherence?
Yeah, well, that's where I originally became aware of that term. Sure. I think I first read a book about HeartMath, must have been like 20 years ago. And so that was when I first became aware of the concept of heart coherence, and I was intrigued by it. I obviously, as it says in my bio, I struggled with bipolar disorder most of my life. Started out, frankly, life was a struggle for me. And growing up as a kid, school was a struggle for me. By the time I hit fifth grade, it was fifth grade, my teachers had encouraged my mother to take me out of the public school and have me enrolled at the state hospital where they had a school for troubled children there. And she decided not to do that and kept me in the public school system. And through my first time through my junior year, I flunked. And my second time through, I was getting into so much trouble that my vice principal said, Eric, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to recommend that you quit school, because if you don't, you're going to cause a lot of trouble. So, so I wound up leaving school before graduating. My mother was, I was a wild child, but my mom was smart enough to make sure that I went and got my GED immediately after it. I did do that, but I struggled through life after that. Probably, I'd say maybe 5 years after that, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I went in and out of suicidal ideation over the course of that 40 years. Had a very hard time maintaining relationships, maintaining jobs. And so suicide often became something I thought about a lot, because I just didn't think I had the ability to adjust to life here on Earth. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I went through various periods. I was in and out of churches. I spent a period as a Christian minister. And also indicative of the bipolar disorder, I swung from one extreme to the other. So after being a minister, at that point, I went through what they call the Christian backsliding experience. And I got into the occult, and I got into the dark side of things, esotericism. And at one point, probably got pretty close to the edge of what seemed like insanity at the time. And I had an epiphany. I came out of that knowing that I had to find healing, and it was going to have to do with love. And I started reading everything I could get my hands on around transpersonal psychology, self-help, Eastern philosophy, you name it. If it was interesting to me, if it was going to stretch my heart and my mind, I was reading it. And I went through about 100 books in about 6 or 7 months. And it was around this time that I came across the heart math literature. And but that's still, my healing didn't really gel there, because there was just so much trauma I was dealing with, so much just craziness, really, to be honest. And so I went through, before I wound up taking taking up a meditation practice, I went through roughly 5 years of homelessness. So about a year and a half of living, a year and a quarter of living on the streets, sleeping in a back alley, about another year and a quarter or so of living in homeless shelters and halfway houses, about a year and a quarter of living in a tent, and I think about a year and a half of living in a van. And so it was, I've basically been to hell and back. And the good news that came out of that was I really wanted to heal. I knew, basically I came to the point was, look, I'm either going to find healing or I'm committing suicide, period. There's nothing in between. I'm either going to commit to changing my life or I'm just going to end it. And the epiphany that I had is that because we're all connected and all things are connected, that if I would take responsibility for my life and take responsibility for healing it, that commitment and that decision would be recorded in the quantum field, so to speak, and because I was deciding to say yes to life, that would have an effect across the quantum field, everything that's fed by the quantum field, and it would make it easier for other people to say yes to life. And so then I embarked on a meditation practice. The first few months of that was awesome. I was reading everything I could get my hands on and about Buddhism and Vedanta, just jumping in as deep as I could get and meditating 3 hours a day and going into some, what at the time seemed some pretty elated, deep, profound states. And I was naive enough to think, man, I'm close to enlightenment. I'm getting close. And right at that point, I went into a deep depression again. And it lasted a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. And when I hit that period, it really, really was difficult for me because I thought, oh, man, I was making such progress. And for the depression to come back so hard and heavy, it was as though all the work I had done up to that point really didn't mean anything. So when I made it out of that depression, I thought, I don't want to give up on meditation. So I started experimenting with different brain-mind technologies like brainwave entrainment with success. And years before, I had also read about the claim of one guy to claim to captured subtle energy on CDs, but I'd never tried them. So I started experimenting with those kinds of technologies, and I started having success with them. I was able to get off the straights, and I went to college, and I ended up doing really well in college, surprisingly. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finding my purpose. I wound up getting, earning about somewhere around $40,000 or $50,000 in merit-based scholarships. Was featured in USA Today magazine as one of the top community college students in the country, and I got a full ride scholarship to Europa University. And so during that time, I had developed my own brainwave entrainment technology, and I had talked the community college psychology department into allowing me to basically set up and run what amounted to a graduate level study on brainwave entrainment. I got to go present those results at the, I think it was the 2008 or the 2009 Western Psychological Conference in Irvine, California. Wound up going to Europa University, and then while I was there, started a company called iAwake Technologies with 3 partners. And during that time, behind the scenes, even though I had a brainwave entrainment company, I was, secretly behind the scenes experimenting with subtle energy. And part of what renewed my interest and my passion in that was I'd gotten to the point where brainwave entrainment just wasn't, I was bored with it. And my meditation practice had hit a plateau, and I had been holding the intention for a while to meet a new teacher that could help me go to that next level in meditation. And I wound up meeting a Shaktipat master who, strangely enough, introduced me not only to Shaktipat, but Shaktipat long distance. So for the first 2 years that I studied with him, I never even met him in person. But I would just get on the phone with him, or I would think about him, and I would go into these profound states of samadhi, just bliss and elation and ecstasy. I could feel the currents of Shakti coursing through me. And, of course, being a brainwave entrainment guy, I thought, wait a minute, is it possible to capture these kinds of currents? Energetic currents, capture them in digital format and embed them into digital media and democratize the Kundalini awakening via Shaktipat. As much as I really appreciate and treasure the experience I had with my Shaktipat teacher, it did come with quite a few challenges, and a lot of them good, some of them not so good. And I became, impassioned with this idea to democratize these higher subtle energetic states without necessarily the need for a guru. Not that I'm anti-guru by any means, but I do understand some of the problems that can come along with that relationship here in the West. So, and it occurred to me that, electromagnetic energy, it can be captured, it can be amplified, right? It can be transformed. Sound energy can also be stored, it can be amplified, and it can be broadcast. And so it just made sense to me that these subtler type energies that are associated with consciousness, associated with Kundalini, associated with other various types of subtle energies, prana, orgone. In my, we can talk about this later if you wish, in my ongoing research, and I'm always learning, I know a lot of people tend to equate, they say Kundalini, chi, orgone is all the same thing, but in my experience, they're not exactly the same thing. They're all gradations of subtle energy, and they're all related, but they're all pretty much unique. So chi and prana are probably related, but there are differences. Whereas in the traditional Chinese medicine, there's 3 kinds of chi, but in yoga and Vedanta, there's 5 types of prana, right? And orgone, when we've done various types of dowsing research using what they call medical dowsing, it's not the same as mental dowsing. We see that chi has different energetic gradations to it than, say, orgone energy. But so I became fascinated with all this stuff, and eventually I started incorporating subtle energy into the brainwave entrainment technology that I was creating. The early technology it's early technology. It's nascent technology. At that time, when I was first putting it out about, almost 10 years ago now. So some of those early tracks that are out there, they give you a taste of what was to come, but they're really they weren't that powerful because I was still learning. There weren't any manuals teaching me how to do this. I didn't have any teachers teaching me how to do this. Although I was training with different types of teachers, I was really having to learn how to, more or less invent and apply different techniques in new ways to be able to do this in the digital medium in a way that people could palpably feel and experience consciously the effects of, because essentially we live in a society where most people are sort of conditioned to be insensitive to subtle energies. As you know, we're surrounded by a sea of subtle energy and all kinds of cosmic influences, planetary influences, solar influences, and those are the ones, those we can even measure, but what are the ones we can't measure with electromagnetic instruments? What about those really subtle quantum fluctuations that are happening all the time that science hasn't been able, right? So, and by the way, when we talk about what's subtle energy, we're talking about energies that aren't generally, can't be categorized within the four known forces of physics. So that would be the strong and weak nuclear forces, electromagnetism, and gravity. And the more I research into subtle energy, both in the written literature and in the laboratory, the more I come to the conclusion that subtle energy is probably at the more at the cause of gravity. It's what lies below gravity. It's actually what's probably producing gravity, right?
Yeah, scientists are starting to believe that it's more electromagnetism that's running the show and the cause of gravity.
Yeah, and
tend to believe that
if
now.
You looked at the torsion physics, spin. You know,
everything's got spin. Yeah, well, you read that in the book.
Yeah, and of course Nassim Haramein writes about that. So spin, well, in the Russian physics research, they call that torsion, and it's interesting because the first Western scientist to actually study subtle energy was a guy by the name of Carl von Reichenbach. He was a chemist. He invented paraffin and creosote. He was independently wealthy, and he became fascinated with subtle energy that at the time he called OD, or odic force. And he concluded that there were two poles of subtle energy. There was what he called negative ode and positive ode. And then some 150 years later, Nikolai Kozyrev, who was a Russian physicist who discovered torsion, he came to the same conclusion, except he called it torsion, and he came up with the idea of he called it right-hand torsion, which would have been negative ode, and left-hand torsion, which would have been positive ode. And so essentially torsion and subtle energy are the same thing, and they're spin. So it's energy that's pulsing and spinning in a particular direction. And that is probably at what's happening on the quantum level to create gravity and electromagnetism. What I think would be interesting to do, and I'm sorry I'm taking up all the airwaves here. I'm on a run here. But what I think would be really interesting is, now although we're talking about subtle energy, what's so awesome about this is that it relates to the free energy world as well. And I believe we're going to be going into a new era of where many different types of free energy devices are going to come onto the market. And those are all related to the science of subtle energy because essentially they're drawing free energy out of the quantum vacuum. Now, what most of them do is they're tapping into the quantum vacuum to pull out this free energy, as it were, but then they step it down to some form of combustion engine or electromagnetic energy to run our modern world. But what I am really getting inspired with, Joan, is this idea that it's time for us, I think, to evolve beyond the electromagnetic grid and the electromagnetic instruments in general. Even though a lot of our world runs on this, one of the reasons why I think it's important is because one of the problems we're having right now is that there are people who want to make wireless electricity that's spread out through the globe. But that carries with it, unfortunately, the dangers of electrosmog. Now, that can be mitigated. There are, we have our own technology, and there are other really legitimate companies out there that are putting out some fine EMF protection products that can transmute the EMFs so that if we did have wireless energy that spread out throughout the planet, you could, if you did it right, you could plan it so that you have these devices set up in these power centers that's providing this wireless energy, and thereby you would transmute the waves coming out. So there would still be an EMF. It would be transformed from left-hand torsion to right-hand torsion. So left-hand torsion is what's producing all the electrosmog.
So in other words, with this, excuse me for 1 second. So in other words, with this 5G technology, where they're going to have all of these towers that are going to be emitting this electromagnetic radiation, smaller towers, that you could set up near them or, wherever you need to put them, this technology that would mitigate the effects of that electromagnetic radiation?
Absolutely. And not only would it mitigate the effects of it, but it would essentially broadcast this positive, beneficial right-hand torsion out into the world, and that would actually have a balancing effect on living systems. So it actually turned 5G into a positive thing.
That's awesome.
So
now, it makes me think about how we have tuned our instruments to, I can't remember, like the 432, and you want to do it to a more harmonic tone that's in balance with our own frequency. So that's awesome. That's really encouraging, because I'm thinking of doing a whole show on 5G, and Yeah,
I know there's a lot of horror stories out there about 5G, and I'm certainly not an expert on it, but from the information I'm getting about it, some of it intuitive, it's not going to be as bad as people think it is. It's kind of people are kind of overreacting about how bad they think it's going to be. And like I said, we do have the technology capable of balancing it out, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as people think it will be. And some of the information I've gotten is that while there will be some people who have adverse reactions to it, a lot of people aren't. It's just like anything. I mean, there are certain types of herbs out there that a lot of people can take, but then, one out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000 people will take that same herb and they'll break out, or they'll have some kind of bad reaction to it. So 5G is going to be, my understanding of it, it's going to be kind of like that. Not everyone's going to have a bad reaction to it. But so getting back though to the EMF idea is, wouldn't it be powerful to have a power system that no longer was, dependent upon electromagnetism, so it couldn't be taken out by a solar storm, it couldn't be taken out by a magnetic pulse, it couldn't be taken out by inclement weather. In other words, and it was an organic energy pulled right out of the quantum vacuum and not stepped down into electromagnetism, but kept at a higher, more organic, more life-enhancing frequency, so that you could spread it throughout the whole Earth, and all you would need is maybe, say, a small disc made of organic material that would pick it up, and then you can use that to distribute the energy throughout your vehicle, throughout your, if you ran a farm, throughout your entire farm or your home or your business. And it was electrosmog free. It was impossible to be electrocuted by it, and it was essentially free energy. You might need to rent maybe the distribution system that distributes it, but it would be essentially free energy that no one could turn off. That's sort of my vision. That's what I think is possible. I think it's necessary.
That is awesome.
And
definitely
that would also,
necessary.
yeah, and also it would make it easier to bring energy to the entire Earth, because you wouldn't have to have any man-made synthetic infrastructure to support it.
Right.
So,
and it wouldn't be affected by a pole reversal, a magnetic pole reversal. Then.
Right.
Yeah. So we wouldn't have to go back to the dark
organic
ages.
energy.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It would be organic energy. And I think that's, it would be truly green energy, literally the same energy that feeds plants, but right out of the quantum vacuum. So
that's fantastic.
That's what gets me excited. Obviously, that's a big vision.
Yeah.
And it might
gets
take us a way to get
too.
there. Yeah. So I will be quiet for a little bit. let you go.
Well, Eric, I was just so touched about your story, and it even brought me to tears, actually. It just, for me, it just sounds like this journey, this hero's journey of going through this ultimate, forever, it seemed, dark night of the soul. And because you needed to learn all of this to steer your soul in a way that you would, not be sidetracked by society and regular studies and school that just would not serve you, and into an area that your soul said, this is what you came here to do, is just incredible. In this roller coaster ride of awakening that we all go through, and I could relate to several of the portions of your story. It's just so profound, and I think that the genius of your soul is just awakening, and I'm so grateful that you're here at this time. I have to say that, Eric. Thank you for all that you've gone through to get here. I just have to say that. Much gratitude.
Well, it's interesting, Joan, though, because I've often come to the conclusions that as bad as I thought I had it, and I'm sure you know this, there's so many people out there who have had it so much worse. So much worse things, and I've come to the conclusion that we all have that inner genius within us. We've all got it. One of the things I take great joy in is just letting people know that, trust me, if you've ever been the underdog, if you've ever been the kid in class that people laughed at, or teachers said you'll never amount to anything. If you've ever been, even when I was in college, and I'm doing well in college, when I was doing really, really well, then I had people that were like, you'll never win this scholarship, you're just not good enough, and then I wound up winning it. It's, that's in everybody. Maybe because of the early suffering I went through, maybe I felt more of a push to try and do something with my life because I felt like I almost had to survive. But we've all got it. I think that's what the new era is going to be about, is people discovering their gifts and having this enlightenment experience around their gifts and learning to light up the world with their gifts, learning to get out of survival mode and making a living, and learn how to become so ensconced in this world of creativity, of following their inner inspiration, that we create a whole new creative era.
And now's the time. It's beautiful energy for that, because we have Uranus and Taurus now for the next 7, 8 years, and that's all about ingenuity and new value system too. What do we value? Not only new technology, but the values that go with it. Thankfully, and putting our money towards that, and for the earth, towards the earth side, to do things more organically instead of from the heart.
And we need to start with our food. The food's just crazy, isn't it? I mean,
you don't know what.
It's very difficult to find clean food these days. Even when you buy organic, you don't know if it's GMO. You don't know what's been done to it.
Yeah, you pick it up and it feels like it's been dead forever. There's like no life force at all. It's nothing.
Yeah, my naturopath told me, she said, Eric, you have to stop eating wheat and corn. You can't, because it's all got glyphosate in it. It's all got Roundup in it. You just got to get away from it. So, I'm from the Midwest, where corn and wheat's kind of staple of the diet.
That is. Let's talk about your subtle energy technologies that you've developed and how they work. And I know it's a proprietary process, but can you just talk about in general what you do? Because I've gone on your products page and it's phenomenal. And I feel like a kid in a candy store. I don't know which one I want more. I want to buy all of them. So if you could talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start with the idea of subtle energy again. So subtle energy would be any type of energy that can't be categorized within the four known forces of physics. But because it's energy, then it stands to reckon that it can be recorded in some way. It can be stored, right? Like I said, we can capture and store electromagnetic energy. We can capture and store sound energy. Why not capture and store subtle energy? And in fact, there was one of the first people that I know of who did this was a man by the name of Yuri Kronos, who was, I believe he was from the Ukraine, and this would have been in the 80s and the 90s, and he worked with Qigong masters, and he found that he could have Qigong masters project their Qi into a transducer that he would have hooked to a magnetic tape machine, and he could record their Qi emissions on magnetic tape. So that when he played the tape back, he would get the same effects as if the Qigong master was there projecting his Qi. And by the way, it is regular practice for Qigong masters. There's been a lot of scientific research done on Qigong masters, done some amazing things in the laboratory. But it's regular practice for them to, use their Qi to heal others. They'll sometimes even project their Qi into water and have their patients drink that, and that structured water will conduct a healing within them. So he sent these tapes out to various people who were familiar with Qigong and what Qi felt like and working with Qigong masters. And they verified this is Qi. This is real Qi. And he found that for people who were really sensitive, they didn't even have to play the tape. You just put the magnetic tape in their hand, and the energy would come right out, because the magnetic part of the tape would energize the Qi signature that was recorded there, and so they could feel the energy coming right off the tape. And they could even turn the volume of the music if they put music on it. And they could turn the volume of the music all the way down, and the chi energy would still come out because it was occupying the tape independently of the music.
Interesting.
And so I thought, well, then there has to be. So I wasn't the first one to do this. But I was, he had done it on magnetic tape, and I'd heard of at least a couple other people doing it in the digital format, and I had tried some of those, but they weren't very strong. And so I became obsessed with this idea of really making these subtle energetic currents much more powerful, higher amplitude in digital format, because I knew that that's what was taking my meditation practice to the next level. I would just get high on this Shakti pod energy to the point that I was no longer having to struggle with my mind. The Shakti would just travel through my body and through my spine and up through the chakras, of course, and into the third eye and up through the crown, and it would meditate me. It would I just let go, and the energy did all the work. And I knew that if we could get this amplitude strong enough, we could help people to have similar experiences. So what we do, this is over a 10-year period of working with this and trying to figure all this out. What we do is essentially we capture various energetic signatures digitally. Then we import that, so it's a 3-step process. The first is to capture the signature. I'll go through a short synopsis, and then I'll go back and kind of break each one down. The first one is capture. We capture the energetic signature digitally. Then 2, we amplify that signature equivalent to millions, if not billions of times. And then we encode that signature as the third and final step. We encode it into digital media such that when you play the digital media on electronic devices, the energy is emitted through that digital media. It interfaces with the electromagnetic field of those electronic devices. It neutralizes the harmful effects of the EMF of those devices by transmuting their left-hand torsion into right-hand torsion. And then it uses that field as a carrier wave to deliver whatever energetic signature is encoded into that digital media program. So we have capture, amplify, and encode. So how do you capture an energetic signature? How do you even create an energetic signature? Well, people ask me, well, how do you do it? Well, we actually have multiple methods. It depends on what we're trying to do. So before when we talked earlier, before the program, you had mentioned if it was possible to capture the energetic signature of a person. And it is possible to do that, but the way we would do that would be very unique to how we do other types of energetic signatures. I won't go into that one, but it is possible to do, and it's a little technical, but one of the most common ways is, so we found in this research, and what we found is not really peculiar to us. We learned this if you ever heard of the fields of radiesthesia or radionics.
Yeah.
So, for example, radionics machines, they will, you can put, let's say, some type of essential oil in a radionic well, and then you can broadcast the energetic signature of that essential oil to whatever target, whatever person you want to broadcast it to. Well, in my research, what I discovered is that there's an actual carrier wave that's making that possible. And while it's not measurable or detectable using any conventional scientific electromagnetic instruments, It is detectable using various types of what they call physical dowsing instruments or medical dowsing instruments. And this is where it's not like mental dowsing where you just take a pendulum and you ask a question and it spins clockwise if the answer is yes and counterclockwise if the answer is no. That type of dowsing can be very it can be very unreliable because as I understand it, what's happening is when you do that, you're engaging the mental body, and the mental body, it's also connected to an unconscious, a collective unconscious. It's connected to our belief systems. It's connected to the fight or, it has connection to the fight or flight. So if you ask questions that are survival based and they put the body in a survival mode of consciousness, then you're not going to get a reliable answer using mental dowsing, even though there are some really good mental dowsers out there who are incredibly accurate. For the average person, it's a difficult thing to master. So what medical dowsing is and physical dowsing is, you are using a pendulum, but the difference is that you're using specific shapes on the pendulum. So the weight that hangs down from the string, it is shaped in a particular way because of what's called shape power. So essentially, researchers like Dan Davidson and who wrote a book called Shape Power, and the co-founders of the French School of Radiesthesia, Jean-Marie and de Balazal, what they all kind of discovered is that specific shapes or specific geometries produce specific subtle energetic gradations in the immediate environment. And the way that Dan Davidson basically theorized that this works is because everything is situated within the quantum field, right, or the ether. And the quantum field, as he defines it, is like it's a superfluidic particulate medium. So that acts like water, right? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because, and you bring this up in your book as well, that in all the different scriptures, the Tao Te Ching, the Hebrew Bible, the Christian New Testament, we have these allegories of water, these metaphors of water as spirit. Excuse me, I need to take a drink of water. My throat's a little bit dry.
We all need that water.
Yeah, feeling that scratch in the back of my throat. So what he found was that because we're surrounded by this superfluidic particulate ether, fluidic medium that we call the quantum, any geometry that's immersed in it will naturally produce specific longitudinal compression waves that are directly tied to the specific geometry of that shape. So, for example, if you take a cruise liner and you put it in the ocean, that geometry that is immersed into the water, when it starts moving, it's going to create specific eddy patterns in the immediate water around it that are peculiar to its geometry. And Dan Davidson theorized that this is probably what's happening with shape power. This is why specific geometries like the pyramids, right, like the tetrahedron, like the flower of life, circles.
Crop circles.
This is why they produce palpable energies that can be picked up by sensitives.
Yeah.
So,
like I say, it's the form that informs. It's this information that's coming out, but in this, and you're able to, or these people are able to, further define it.
Right. So what he found, what Jean-Marie de Balazal found, was that if you take specifically shaped pendulums, and you hold the pendulum in your hand, so it's dangling by a string, and you've got a pendulum that is calibrated, say for the specific energetic gradient that makes radionics possible, for example. And the technical term for that is horizontal negative green. It's neither horizontal nor negative nor green. It's a technical term. But if you have that specifically calibrated pendulum, what you're going to do in physical dowsing is instead of asking a question, you're just going to run your chi through your arm, down through the pendulum, and then down into the thing that you're testing. And you're testing to see if it has the same energy for which the pendulum itself is calibrated, right? And so what will happen is, it's a very scientific process. You're running you're basically using your own aura, your own biofield, as a super sensitive, subtle, energetic measuring and detection device. Because the reason why is because your biofield and your aura can enter into resonance with anything, right? And so it's really using the universal language of resonance. You're going to run your chi through your arm, down through the pendulum, into the thing you're testing. This is really a right-brained exercise. You're going to
healers do it all the time.
When you're doing that, you're not asking a question. You're just running the energy through there. And what happens is, if you're really sensitive, you'll notice that if the thing you're testing does have that energy that the pendulum is calibrated for, if it has that energy in it, then you'll feel your own aura sort of switch into that resonance. And what will happen is, then the pendulum will start spinning. Because essentially you've entered into resonance with that thing, and you use the pendulum to do that because it's calibrated for that particular. And so what it's a kind of transducer. It takes your energy, transduces it into that particular energetic gradient, passes it on to the thing that's being tested, and if the thing that is being tested has that energy gradient in it, it will enter into resonance, and your biofield will enter into resonance through the pendulum with that thing. And so what they found was, they found that this carrier wave that's associated with radionics was what they call horizontal negative green. It was also found in saints, was found in holy places, sacred pilgrimage sites. It was found, it was associated with prayer. There was a Russian researcher by the name of Scurry. Go ahead.
I was going to say,
well, there was a researcher
embedded there. I don't know if that's the true technical term, because there isn't a term about embedding, but I felt that energy in Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the prayer room there. They do prayer 24/7, and I thought I was having a heart attack that day.
Well, that's interesting, because horizontal negative green is one of it is one of the main signatures that the heart produces.
I felt it.
And it's probably produced in part through the vortex that's set up in the heart. So, and when you talk about the golden mean vortex that produces the heart in birth, well, it turns out that is associated with these energies that's that energy, that golden mean spiral you talk about, that's the main energy we use to neutralize all the negative effects of EMF.
That's interesting, because the golden mean, I was looking at your product, and that the golden proportion was the one that caught my attention. I'm like, that's the one I really want, and that's one I want to talk to you about, that one and the Earth Pulse.
Okay.
Well, I want to get to both of those before we're done, and I'm noticing that we're almost up at the top of the hour. I do have enough time to go 90 minutes, but I just want to put that out there to you, Eric, because I think it'd be useful for the listeners to hear about that.
Getting all, went through all that to get to this thing of horizontal negative green. So that's one of the carryways we use in our technology. And what we found is we can couple that. Let's say if we want to capture, our latest product is digital C60. So what we do is we take that energetic signature of horizontal negative green, and we couple it with a physical quantity of carbon-60 fullerene molecule. And what we found that it does is that horizontal negative green carrier wave will extract the morphic field or the informational field of C60, and then we can capture that digitally. Once we do that, then we import that digital signal into a computer program, and we run it through a feedback system during the amplification process, and we feed that signal back on itself because subtle energy is additive, which means the more subtle energy charges you add together, the stronger they get. Mm-hmm. So we run it through this feedback system to amplify the signal in a balanced way. Then the final is that we encode it into digital media. And it sounds strange. It's like, well, how do you do it? I can't give you the exact process, but essentially, we use an encoding process that has been, we have had several scientific studies performed on it with using biophotonic imaging, for example, with great success, using a variation of that called the ARA camera, and also using the HeartMath Institute's M-Wave. So we've had that research done, and we're still a small company, so we're self-funded. We don't have anybody funding us. We're self-funded just through the products that we sell. We're still a small operation, but as we expand and grow, we will obviously have more and more scientific experiments. I'm creating a personal EMF protection device right now that I'm having had tested, and so far the researchers that I've had testing it for me, who are experts in biophotonic imaging and experts in medical dowsing and biogeometry, they've given it two really big thumbs up so far. So we'll be certainly doing a lot more scientific study.
And that's to protect you from EMF radiation?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish you all the best on that one. I'll have to let you know how that's going, Eric. So, wow. This is just so incredibly awesome. I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying this show. And the list of the products is just, I could just go down and just purchase every one, really. And you also have mandalas. So tell us, is that a little bit different, or how do those work? Are they as strong as
the mandalas are
audio waves?
The mandalas are standalone programs, and essentially all they are is energetically encoded digital pictures. We call them Mondelez because in the beginning, in the early years when I was making these, and I was still learning graphic design, the only images I could make on my own were these simple Mondelez, but it's not the actual visual design that's creating the energetic effect. It's the energetic encoding, and so they come in 4 formats for your large computer screen, small computer screen, phone and tablet, and then we have a printout that you can print it out. You can color in black and white, and we'll carry the energy of that signature. so that you can put it, you can tape it to the outside of your fuse box door, and the energy will travel through the fuse box and through all your electrical appliances, everything that's fed electricity, including your water heater, refrigerator. The food will carry the energy. You can put the prints under your mattress, under your cushions, under your pillows. You can put them under your power strips, and the energy will be carried by the electrons through the power cords into your electronic devices, and carry that energy. You basically can transform all of your electronics into, advanced subtle energy devices. But those
and it never runs out, correct? They never run
out, and you can amplify them. We have simple instructions. You can open up multiple copies of these on computers and Macs and laptops, and we have some people open as many as 100. I'm going back and redoing all the older products because as we go along, the products keep getting more and more powerful. So I'm going back and redoing the older products to bring them up to the current level of the technology, so that the more powerful they get, the less amplification you need to do. And, some people are more sensitive to subtle energy than others, so some people require more amplification than others. I require very little. And what's cool about this, though, is that the more you use the technology and the more you use your subtle senses to pay attention to the effects that they're having in you and around you, the more you're actually developing your subtle sixth sense and your neural networks to be able to pick up these fine gradations of energy. And of course, the more sensitive you grow to them, the more effective they become. So, the Mondelez they're fairly inexpensive, really, really powerful. I've in my quest to understand this technology, I've experimented with all different types of subtle energy devices out there, and I've spent quite a bit of money on them. And I have devices that I've spent, $2,000 or $3,000 on that aren't nearly as powerful as our $27 Mondelez. And then again, you can amplify them to make them as powerful as you need for your specific needs. So that's something you don't often get with these hardware subtle energy devices. But not to put them down, I think I think there's a place for all of them, but I'm just there are some things that make our technologies unique. And then we have audio programs that also include Mondelez as part of their multi-component programs. They include 20 and 60-minute audios that are energetically encoded, very powerful. They come with Mondelez. They also come with a mild Mondelez, because once we get into these programs, they're often so powerful that some very sensitive people will find them too powerful, so they will use the mild versions for longer periods of time, because even good energy you can get too much of if your body's not able to integrate all of it. And again,
I understand
it varies from person to person. Yeah. So there's that, and then they also have video. We have videos that come with the audios as well that carry the energy, and we have a silent audio with each of those. That's 1 minute length, so you can open up multiple copies without taxing the RAM of your computer, and you can get those really, really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I see you have different subjects here. Adrenal boost. I could use that lately up so exhausted. Headache relief. We have stuff like that, all the way to pineal gland activations. We have increased the IQ. The ones that I'm really interested in, the two of them, are the Earth pulse, where you're actually establishing the Earth's frequency through your body. So you're taking the Schumann resonance and amplifying it then?
Yes. So what we're working there is the 7.83 hertz pulse, as a extremely low frequency, ELF, and we capture the energetic signature of that as a digital signal and amplify it so we get it super, super strong. But it comes with a mild version as well, so that the strong version, depending on how sensitive you are, you might not be able to use it all day long because it might be just too strong for you. If you've done the studies on where Schumann resonance has been used to improve health conditions, it's usually delivered at a very weak amplitude. It doesn't take much. So we have different components with different amplitudes that come with that program, so you can find what works for you. You can use it as a meditation too. You can get the energy really strong, say for an hour. Go into a really nice meditation, get really nice and buzzed.
Regarding that one, I have a question. Does the Schumann resonance somehow in your research or in what you've actually done correspond to a similar frequency that's emitted through the heart's electromagnetic field? Are they any way? I'm just wondering because I know that the heart's electromagnetic field is somehow connected to the Earth's electromagnetic field. So with this Schumann resonance that the Earth puts out, I'm just wondering how they correlate, if they do.
That's a really good question. I don't know all the answer to that. I actually came to that part in your book because they're both torus-shaped. And so there's a relationship. I know there's definitely a relationship between the human skull. Now, Michael Persinger's gone into this. There's a video out there where he talks about this on YouTube, where if you look at the dimensions of the skull, and you look at the diameter of the Earth or at the ionosphere, it's actually a harmonic of the dimensions of the skull. So there's definitely a relationship between the Earth's magnetic field and the skull. Where it comes in with the heart per se, I don't know enough to know that. But I would say intuitively, there's definitely a relationship there. We do know that there's a correlation when there are periods of extreme quiet with the Earth's electromagnetic field. When it's quiet, there have been these studies where they can correlate that with spikes in psychic activity, reported psychic activity.
And according to heart math, intuitive information comes through the heart first.
Yes, yeah,
they've shown that.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a big, for sure.
Yeah, it's the largest electromagnetic field in the body, so it's going to pick it up
and it's
first.
Also, that's a fascinating subject. The heart, I've noticed that when you lead with your heart, you can actually feel things around you, around your immediate environment through your heart. You can literally feel them when you get sensitive and you pay attention, leading with your heart consciousness.
And that's what the Indigenous, I'm sure, did. They know so much about this. We're just kind of going back and now doing it more in a scientific manner. But what about the golden proportion one? Because we talked about that earlier, the golden mean. That's supposed to neutralize electromagnetic frequencies and balance any environment. It says on your website.
Yes. We put a little bit of that in every product we make.
Really?
Because
okay.
Because that is the portion of all of our products that neutralizes the negative effects of EMF. But the golden proportion program is an exceptionally strong version of the golden proportion energy. It's really, really powerful. And so essentially, now, so you heard me earlier, we talked about Chamari and de Balazal. These were these two early co-founders of the French School of Radiesthesia. They were trying to make medical radiesthesia. They were trying to bring it into the popular culture, but the mental dowsing ended up becoming more and more popular, and also because Chamry and de Balazal, there were certain things that they hadn't figured out yet. They didn't realize that there were two versions of this horizontal negative green, which is actually, as we'll find out later, is related to the golden proportion energy. They didn't realize there's two versions of this negative green. There's a horizontal version, which is beneficial, but there's a vertical, what they call a vertical version, which is detrimental. And so what happened was they were developing these huge negative green generators using shapes, specific shapes, and they were huge, they were big, so they were really powerful. And while I believe it was Chamry who, while he was doing this and he was in the lab, he got too much of the negative version or the detrimental version of negative green, and he was found dead in the laboratory. As I understand it, it kind of mummified him. Well, that's basically they verified that this is what the Egyptians used. This is one of the things they used to mummify their corpses.
Wow.
And it's also probably what was associated with what they called the curse of Tutankhamun, where they had people dying mysterious deaths because they were set up to emit this detrimental version of negative green if anyone were to open
the tomb, the
tombs or the caskets. So, and there was one researcher who came out of it unscathed, and he was wearing a sacred geometrical form called the Atlantean ring, and Chamry and de Balazal researched that using their medical radiesthesia, and they found that it naturally protects from this detrimental form of negative green. So, long story short, Chamry ended up dying. So that was the end of physical radiesthesia or medical radiesthesia. Mental dowsing ended up becoming really popular, and all of de Balazal and Chamry's work was shelved. Years later, there was a young Egyptian architect who found their work and inherited all their manuscripts. And he had done his own research on sacred power spots, places where people have spontaneous healings and so on and so forth. And he discovered that this horizontal negative green was found there. But he also came to the conclusion that it wasn't just this horizontal negative green that was involved in these sacred sites. He found that there were two other energies that he designated the higher harmonic of gold, which is essentially a subtle energy gradient that is in resonance with physical gold, but it's a much higher harmonic of gold. And then he found this other energy was called the higher harmonic of ultraviolet. So again, it's in resonance with ultraviolet light, but it's a much higher harmonic.
Right.
And it turns out it's involved in intuition. There have been near-death experiences where there were these gifted kids who came back from near-death experiences, had psychic gifts, and in every case, they described being in this dark light, like an ultraviolet light, and they were probably immersed in this higher harmonic of ultraviolet, and they came back with various types of psychic gifts. But so he found that this trinity of energies, horizontal negative green, higher harmonic of gold, and higher harmonic of ultraviolet, that they, at these sacred sites, and where you find the golden mean in nature, they appear as this energy that I call golden proportion energy. He has his own name for it. But he found that this energy was at the center of the creation process in nature.
Right.
And he found it had a natural balancing effect on spaces and on EMF.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm just noticing, Eric, that we only have maybe about 14 minutes left, and I want to be sure to have enough time to play at the end of the show the clip that you provided us. Can you tell us what that clip is shortly, and then we can... I want to have enough time
this is a
to
5-minute
share
clip.
your free offer and all of that, too.
Oh, right. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. So this is by the way, so the free offer. So we have a free offer for everyone if you're interested. It's called Release the Past. And it's essentially, it's a mandala. We talked about the mandalas earlier. You can use this on your computer, laptop, Mac, phone, or tablet. You can print it out and put it under your cushions. We also have a version of it on the download page that, once you get to the download page, there's a version of it that you can just open up on a web page, and you don't have to download anything. So if you're on a phone, you don't have to download anything. You can just go to this web page, and it will automatically broadcast this energy. And what it's designed to do is just help you to release any undesirable past event. So let's say you've had an argument with somebody, and if you, like I've been at times where I've been in an argument with people, and then I just play it over and over in my head, can't get it out of my head, or ruminate over it, or I should have said this, I should have said that. What you do is you just pull up the mandala. You can amplify the energy. We give you instructions on the download page how to do that. You keep playing with it until you find the right amplitude of energy for you. Then you just open the mandala. You don't have to look at it. You can minimize it, work in other windows, and the energy will come through into your biofield. And then you just want to think of that undesirable past event that's related to whatever troubling emotion that you're experiencing. Just think of it and keep thinking of it with the intention of letting it go as you run the mandala energy through you. And it happens at different times for different people, but usually within the first 10 to 20 minutes. Might take longer if you need to amplify it more. And you just keep thinking of that past event, and then eventually it'll just dissipate. You'll notice that you don't have any attachment to it anymore. It just allows you energetically to let it go. It's really quick. It's really powerful. You can also play it all day long and amplify it. What it will do is it will smooth out some of your relationships. It'll keep you from going into those places where you start getting into arguments over things that happened in the past.
Well, we all can use that. So there's a link to it on the page, on the show page, but for those that are listening or later on, I do create YouTubes of this and all, you can go to https://subtle.energy/release-the-path. Okay, release-the-path. And that's where you can get that free offer. And at the end of the show, we're going to have we're going to go out with a 5-minute clip that you provided. Can you tell us what that's about?
Sure. That's from a new program we've just launched this week. It's called Digital C60. It is the energetic signature of carbon-60 fullerene molecules, one of the most powerful antioxidants known to science. It's really quite the amazing little molecule. It's 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. It's antiviral, antibacterial. It's been shown to protect cartilage, increase bone health, to actually prevent tumor growth, to people with the AIDS virus have seen miracles happen with this. It's really pretty amazing. So we've captured this energetic signature, amplified it many times, and encoded it into a full digital multimedia program that includes the Mondelez, it includes various audios, including the 20-minute, 60-minute audios, a silent audio, and a silent energy video. And what we're going to listen to here is a 5-minute demo of the audio, and it's simply soothing nature sounds captured in 3D audio that has the energetic signature of C60 amplified and encoded into it. Generally, this is designed for long-term play. You turn it on, and the longer you play it, the more you feel the energy and the benefits. And we are getting great testimonials from this. People are basically reporting the same benefits that they would get from physical C60 from this.
That's awesome.
People's acne completely clearing up. One gentleman who had liver problems was struggling with chronic fatigue and completely took care of the fatigue. So a lot of cool things are happening here. So 5
That's
minutes
great.
will give you a taste. It'll give you a taste, and just sit back and enjoy.
Well, thank you so much for providing that, Eric. And to get to his website, it's just https://subtle.energy, and you can reach him at support@subtle.energy. And I'm so thankful that you came on today. This has been wonderful. We're going to leave with that, but I just want to give people a little bit of taste of what's coming up next week. We have Dr. Beth Hagens, an anthropologist, and she's going to talk about the unified vector geometry Earth Energies grid that she worked on and her partner. It will be a fascinating show. I know it will be. Please don't miss next week's show. Thank you again so much, Eric, for coming on to the show. And I hope I can have you on again. Would you like to come back on again, Eric?
Oh, I'd love to. I had a great time. I really appreciate you having me.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been Earth Energy Forecast. And remember, stay tuned, stay informed. Here we go. I hope it all healed you. Here's that clip from Eric.